This is Platemark with me, Ann Schaefer. I'm an independent curator specializing in prints, drawings, and photographs, but my special love is prints and the printmaking ecosystem. I love talking to people about what they do. I love talking to artists, and I love talking to printers, and I love talking to curators and scholars and even gallerists. Today's guest is a gallerist. His name is Michael Verne, and his gallery in Cleveland, Ohio is called the Verne Collection. He specializes in contemporary Japanese art and also American artists who live and work in Japan. We talk about all kinds of things and focus a lot on being the small gallery, trying to make it in the world of bigger galleries, and what it takes to navigate and negotiate through the art world and make a living doing it. So it's a fun conversation. I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's see. I'm going to keep this one short. Housekeeping, I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her. I record Platemark in Baltimore, Maryland, the land of the Piscataway Conoy people. Images that Michael and I talk about are over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Check that out, and also you can head over there and hit the support and donate button and help me keep the lights on. All right, let's get rolling. Michael, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks for coming on Platemark.
Thank you very much, Anna. This is my first podcast ever.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I've been following you for a long time. I really admire what you do with your podcast and your art fairs. And my son has a sports podcast, so it inspired me to see if I could do this.
Yeah, I've never said on the pod, but my friend True, who does History of Prints with me, will tell you that when I first met him, said to him, I've always wanted to have my own show. And here we are. Yeah. It's amazing.
Oh, no, it's very important for the art world to be a little bit friendlier and to be as entertaining as watching a baseball game or football game or basketball game.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah. All right. So can you just briefly introduce yourself for everybody, and then we'll move right into it?
Well, my name is Michael Verne. I own and run the Verne Collection of Japanese art. My parents lived in Japan back in 1953 and 54 when my dad was a doctor in the U.S. Navy. And this began as a private collection of old Japanese prints and paintings that were on loan to the Metropolitan Museum and the Cleveland Art Museum and the Fogg at Harvard. And I never thought I would do this in a million years. I grew up kicking soccer balls and throwing baseballs with my friends in the living room where these scrolls would hang, and we were all pretty good athletes. We never hit them. And I'd go over to my friend's house to play, and everybody else had duck paintings and apple paintings and pictures of George Washington, and I knew there was something weird going on in my house.
I love that. But, well, I do want to circle back to your origin story. But before, I just wanted to jump right into ask you, what is it about contemporary Japanese prints and paintings that you think the world needs to know? What's so special about them?
Well, I'll take a step back, and this might give you an idea of why I show what I do. When my parents lived in Japan, they didn't know anything about Japanese art, and they were introduced to a place called Toshiro Fine Arts, and they didn't have very much money at that time, and they began by collecting a pair of scroll paintings for about $15 each from the 18th century. Those were the ones on loan to the Metropolitan Museum, and the very first thing I learned when looking at art is to always use your eyes and use your heart, and you'll get something much better. If you follow trends and hype, in the contemporary Japanese print world, whatever American art world, the European print world, you'll get yourself in a lot of trouble because sometimes things go way up. But if it really isn't the real thing, eventually you'll find you've bought yourself something really, really ugly with with what you thought was the right name. I started doing this about 43 years ago, and because I'm a very visual person, and because I'm also, I grew up watching the Cleveland Indians, the baseball team, and they've always been the underdogs. And being from Cleveland, you have to prove yourself about 10 times more, and you also have to be way ahead of the game. There are a lot of people in my area of expertise, or in the Japanese art world, or the art world in general. Some of these people have tremendous amount of funds to work with, and in order to compete at a high level, you have to find these artists way before everybody says that they're okay. And most of my colleagues are brilliant people, and they're very, very good at what they do. But I've introduced a lot of artists that nobody ever heard of until I started showing them at the art shows. And so I find it a challenge to do this. And in 100 years, they'll say Mike was either brilliant or stupid. But if I'm wrong, a lot of museums are wrong too. So.
Oh, right. I think there is something to be said for collecting beyond your borders, right? But the thing that happened to us as curators was it was impossible to cover all of that area. So, all of those countries in Africa, each one of them has an incredibly vibrant and wonderful contemporary art scene, etc. All of those, Northern Scandinavian countries, like how do you cover all of that stuff? And so I feel like, I think there are people who are dealing with contemporary African, but I feel like contemporary Japanese is a special breed, and you are there, and you guys have been, you and Allison Tolman have been there at the fairs for a long time, and it's made it much more accessible for those of us who are overwhelmed by the idea of going international.
Well, I learned a lot from, Allison is fantastic, and we're good friends, and I learned a lot from her dad. Her dad was the first one I ever saw who was a showman. Before that, I'd seen everybody in the art world being very, very serious, but I learned how to do this initially. When I was a little kid, I watched Saturday morning cartoons or Sunday morning cartoons. And before the cartoons would come on, they would have these evangelists on TV, and they'd get the crowd all worked up. And by the time they were done with the service, people were like throwing money at them. So between the evangelists and Norman, I learned how to explain art at a level that people could understand it.
Well, I think that's critical, and I think that's where print people excel, because we have to spend so much time helping people understand the technical parts, which are often confusing.
Yeah.
Like, it gets you in this role already of education, right? And
yes.
And then leaping in to tell the wonderful stories behind the artist and the work and everything. Like, I feel like the print people have been long practicing this fine art of selling, and I think it comes more naturally to us.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. After having done these art fairs for about the last 35 years, I find everybody has their own way of doing it, and you have to sort of know who you are. I flunked kindergarten, and
what?
I knew that I couldn't express myself like some of these old master dealers and everything else, and so I can tell the stories of the artists that are represented, most of whom are living, from a different aspect, not just how an etching is made or an engraving is made. That's like somebody telling you how the side of your TV works.
Come on now.
And
all right, go continue.
So I tell stories about each artist from a very human standpoint.
You also carry a lot of what we would euphemistically call expatriate artists that live in Japan, American artists who live in Japan. And was that on purpose, or was it just that you met Daniel and whoever else and they kind of fit in your thinking?
Well, again, you have to be a little bit ahead of the curve. And I saw all these people showing Bertha Lom and Helen Hyde from the turn of the century and Charles Bartlett. And I didn't know where to get these works. And I thought, well, there must be another generation of these artists. And most of what I show in my gallery is what I call quiet elegance. I find the world's pretty crazy once I walk out the door in the morning. So most of these images are serene and peaceful. It's not corny stuff. I heard about this guy named Daniel Kelly, and Daniel Kelly was born in Idaho Falls, Idaho, grew up in Great Falls, Montana. And he goes to Japan over 40 years ago, and a few days before he leaves from San Francisco, he has $1.95 in his pocket. And he can't afford the really expensive books on Japanese art, so he buys this small little book in City Lights bookstore. in San Francisco. And in the back of the book, it says, if the reader of this book is in Kyoto, please visit the artist's studio. And it gave the address. And Daniel said, what the heck? He says, I'm going to go visit this Tokariki guy. Became his pupil, and now his works in the Metropolitan Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the British Museum, the Smithsonian, and about 34 other museums. And he would then introduce me to all of these other American artists, and I wrote a book about them. And again, I have an MBA in marketing from the Weatherhead School at Case Western Reserve University, and one of my professors said the key to being successful is to be the first one to do something, and everybody remembers the first. And my mom was one of the first people to bring back fine Japanese prints to the United States after World War II. People thought she was crazy, and she built it up as much as she wanted to. My dad was a doctor, and she did it by appointment. By being the first, you often take a big chance, but it helps to establish your credibility, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I suppose people give you credit for having an eye or something. But I feel like this whole idea of only wanting to collect the work of an artist at that moment when they're recognized, or when and then forgetting about them as they grow and age and stuff, is sort of this false hierarchy. But I think it is a natural human instinct to want to be the first.
Oh, it is. I mean, when I started, everybody knew that Hokusai and Hiroshige and Yoshitoshi and to some degree Hasui were important traditional Japanese woodblock print artists, but nobody knew about these printmakers. I mean, another thing I did, being from Cleveland, you have to prove yourself about 10 times more in the art world. People think only people in New York or Paris or London or Munich know about art. And I had to beg myself into art fairs. I got into a show in Washington, and there was this whole group of smaller dealers that really cared about what they were showing and were really brilliant. And that got me into a show in Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I got into almost every city, but every time I tried to get into New York, I tell them I was from Cleveland. They go, no, I'm sorry, forget it. I heard about a show called Works on Paper run by a guy named Sanford Smith. And the New York Times said this is the #1 Works on Paper show in the country. So I wrote him a letter and told him about the collection. And this is about 6 months before the show. This is 35 years ago. And I also realized that they had never invited a Japanese print gallery to be in the show, at least as far as I know. Maybe they did. I don't know. At any rate, I didn't hear anything back from them. About 2 weeks before the show's going to open, I think it was in March or something, and I get a phone call from this guy, and this guy says, this is Sanford Smith. Do you want to be in the Works on Paper show? And I thought it was one of my friends joking around, and I said, who is this? And he says, this is Sanford Smith. I said, is this really Sanford Smith? Yes, I do. So I didn't have time to hire a shipper, and I didn't know about all these big shippers and everything, and And so I put all this stuff in my mom's old station wagon, and I drive into New York, and I didn't know that much. I didn't realize the Armory was where some of the top shows are held in New York at that time. Now they're all over. But at any rate, I get to the show, and here are 90 of the biggest galleries in the world. They're all from New York, Paris, London, Munich, and you get a little sign in front of your booth space, and mine says Cleveland, and people start walking into the show, and they're looking up, and they're going, Cleveland, what the hell is this guy doing here, And by the end of the show, I had sold more art than I'd ever sold before. I didn't know people actually paid that much money. The decimal point was, I was like Walmart or something as far as price range, not in terms of quality. The only reason I tell you this show, because the second part's the more interesting part. It's at the end of the show, had to pack everything up. My parents were staying a couple extra days in New York, and they had helped me out. And I was dressed in a Brooks Brothers suit, and I've got tens of thousands of dollars in my pocket. I've got the car all packed up, but I don't know. I'm directionally challenged, and I don't know how to get back to Cleveland from there. And I asked the guards at the Armory, I said, how do you get back to Pennsylvania from here? And they said, oh, that's easy. You just go down Park Avenue, you take a right on 34th Street. You'll see signs for the Lincoln Tunnel, which will take you into New Jersey, which will take you to Pennsylvania. And this is before Google Maps and all this stuff. And so I pull out onto Park Avenue, and Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York. And I'm thinking, boy, Michael, for at least for 5 minutes, you're the greatest Japanese print dealer in the world. And I'd heard about all these stories in New York, and I'm a stupid Midwest guy. And I thought, all I got to do is get out of New York. And I take a ride on 34th Street, and it starts getting a little rough. And there's some homeless people leaning up against a building. And I think, God, I just got to get through here. And all of a sudden, I hear the right front tire hit this metal grate in the road, and the right front tire goes flat. It's about midnight now. And I get out of the car, and I look, and I say, boy, it's flat. And my dad didn't teach me how to fix anything. I get back in the car and lock the door, and I see this guy walking down the street with his 3-year-old and his pregnant wife, and not a very wealthy-looking guy. I got out of the car, and I said, excuse me, I got a flat tire. I said, is there a gas station around here? And the guy says, nope. And I said, should I call the police? He goes, nope, they won't come. So I practically got tears in my eyes, and the guy says, where's the spare? So I realized the spare was underneath all the art. So now all the art, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of art, is sitting on the streets of New York. And I think everybody's going to just start picking it up and taking it away. And I've got Johnson Murphy shoes on, and I'm trying to get the lug nuts loose, and they've been put on with one of these machine guns, and I can't get them, budge them. This guy's got heavy boots on, and he says, let me do it, and he gets them loose really quick. I start jacking the car up, and every time I jack the car up, the whole family breaks out into this hymn, and they say, Michael, you got to thank Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm certainly not going to tell this guy I'm Jewish, and I'm not very religious, but at any rate, I said, I'm thanking him, and I sort of hummed along because I didn't know the words, and I get the car halfway jacked up, and he finishes it up, and I asked this guy, can I give you some money for helping me out? He wasn't a wealthy guy. He says, no, if I can't help somebody out, it's just not right. And I ended up sending a print by an artist named Watanabe to him of The Good Samaritan. He was a contemporary Japanese printmaker who did biblical subject matter, and a Barbie doll and a baby book. But this guy was from the Bronx, and he just happened to be walking in New York that night, and his name was De Jesus. But that's the story of getting into New York.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Lord have mercy. That, breaking down on 34th Street at midnight in the 80s. Oh, God.
It reminds you to stay humble, because, sometimes you have a lot of success, but, you can't forget where you came from.
Well, that is true. But I think you're selling Cleveland short, honestly. I went to the College of Worcester, so, I have a half a toe in Ohio. But, Shaker is no sad place to live.
Oh, no, I know. It's just at that time in the 80s, there were a lot of jokes about Cleveland and everything. And Cleveland has one of the best Asian art collections in the world. And Sherman Lee helped my mom out a lot, too, with advice. So.
Nice. When did you start the bricks and mortar part of the gallery?
Well, the biggest mistake most galleries make is they build themselves a palace. And really what you want to do is find a place that's very reasonable, but in a very, very good area. And again, my ideas are, most people have never thought of these ridiculous things, but I had done a few shows at John Carroll University, temporary shows, and the head of the art history department, they had a gallery in the library. Didn't know what they were going to do with this gallery. I said, what would you think of a private gallery moving into the campus? And the rent was very, very reasonable. And I said the students could look and see Japanese art and touch things that they wouldn't be able to see every day. And he said yes. And I also knew that because I flunked kindergarten, it would make me look really smart. because I'd be on a university campus. And so we were there for about 5 years. Then they were going to redo the library, and I had to move. And I heard about this place in Cleveland called Little Italy. It was about 1,000 square feet, and it was $200 a month. And I went down to this little brick storefront, and behind the storefront was an old house, and I knocked on the side door, and this gentleman in his 80s came out, and I said, I heard the place in front is for rent. He said, yes, it is. He says, I'm Ignatius Cusimano, and everybody calls me Jigs, and I've been in the neighborhood for over 70 years, and he invites me in for a cup of coffee, and he had this Italian teacher from one of the local high schools in there, and they both started speaking Italian to me, and they thought I was Italian, and I didn't understand a word, and they go, you're not Italian, are you? I go, no, I'm sorry. So far people have thought I'm Catholic and Italian, and so at any rate, he showed me the place, and I've been here for about the last 25 years. And he used to come and have lunch with me and tell me about all the people in Little Italy, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place to eat dinner. And people still think sometimes the Italian mob runs everything, so it's very safe. It's
Do they?
They might. I don't know. Well, I don't.
Oh, okay.
I do what anybody says here.
Right. A lot of small-ish, footprint-wise dealers have gone private, and everything's now at home, and it's all online. But you maintain this bricks and mortar space. It's kind of unusual.
It's probably pretty stupid at this point, but
that's not
first of all,
what I was saying.
People are afraid to come into galleries as it is because they've seen, these very, very snooty people on TV movies or whatever. But because the rent it's not $200 a month anymore, but it's still pretty reasonable. And because of Will, who you met earlier, we have a pretty good internet presence. And the one thing you learn in MBA school is to know what you know and know what you don't know. And so Will takes care of all the technical aspects, and he's a professional photographer. And then I also have Yuko Kimura, who's also one of my leading artists. She takes care of all the correspondence to Japan. And so it looks like I know what I'm doing so far. It seems to work, but it's becoming very, very difficult for all of us because of all of these internet auctions, and people get confused about the prices. They see this stuff that looks okay on the screen, but if you take it out of the frame, it's all toned, and you're much better off working with a professional, I think. Sometimes it costs a little bit more, but at least you know what you're getting.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because actually on the pod we have often talked about, are you making art that looks good on Instagram? Or are you actually making art that, transcends Instagram? And it's a little bit of a trap. So I agree with you on that one. It's
very, very scary. I mean, it looks very, very good, but you're taking a big chance. If there are some very, very good auction houses, don't get me wrong, but there's so many little auction houses that used to have one little specialty, but now they specialize in everything, and they don't really know what they're selling.
That's true. I mean, you can't be a specialist in everything, right?
No, I definitely
know what you know, right? Yeah, but Michael, I'm curious to know, and this is a thing that we have sort of touched and dodged by. You don't have prices on your website. What is the thinking there?
The problem is that you have to constantly, when you're working with living artists, they're constantly changing the price, and I don't have time to do it. And also, because everybody's checking out the internet, you're providing information to the people that can use that information to just cut your price down $100 or whatever. And I think a lot of people have told me to put the price on there and everything, but you honestly, I don't know whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong. I also, it stops people from stealing it too, because they don't know how much it's worth.
Okay. All right. I'll take that point.
I don't know. I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is. And I think both ways are very good. As far as the galleries, we're all pretty much the same price, but there's a lot of stuff, a lot of people, that they'll call you and ask like they're looking for something to buy, and they're also just found something at auction and they want to cut your price.
So you don't want to help these people figure out.
Well, I go to codependent meetings, which is for people that are too nice. So, but if I honestly don't know. I generally do try to help them, but I sometimes regret it because they're not being honest about why they're asking about the price.
It's always been a kind of a curious thing. Like I don't want to have to email you every time. I'm like, oh, Daniel's, goldfish in a bowl is so gorgeous. How much is it? But on the other hand, maybe that's a great way for you to, capture me and start a relationship as a buyer and, talk me through the process or however you approach new buyers to the gallery. So I can see it.
I might be losing a few people. I think nowadays, there's only about five galleries like the Verne Collection. We all have our own taste. We all try to just sort of help each other at this point because we're competing against the auction market now.
I've never actually. That's interesting. I haven't really talked to anybody about that either. This whole problem of the auction.
Yeah,
just because there's so many of them and it's so easy.
It's very easy. There's something, I don't want to name the place, but it's a big auction house that takes all these little auction houses and they put them all together to make a very, very powerful place. And I think people like the excitement of trying to get something for much less than it's worth. I'd say 90% of the time you're getting what you pay for. Every once in a while, 10% of the time you find that diamond in the rough. I think that's another reason to not maybe post the prices.
No, there are reasons to do both, right? And reasons not to do both. So it's or let you have your personal preference, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I think you know that you have to inquire about every work on the website for the Verne Collection, and you'll figure out that you're going to have a new relationship with Michael when you do, people.
Once they meet me.
Which is not a bad thing, because he's funny.
Yeah.
So do you still look for and do you still sell older material?
Yeah, if I can find it. But again, most of the people, this is what I didn't realize, when I started doing this 43 years ago, I grew up in Shaker Heights around a lot of successful people and their kids all went into business with their very successful family businesses. I grew up around a lot of these people when I said I was going to go into business and build this small gallery that my mom started up. All these country club people and everything else, they go, "Oh, that's wonderful, Mike. I'm sure you'll do fine." And then they winked and like that. And I didn't realize that many people that go into the art world have either inherited a lot of money or they've been very successful doing something else. And they think it's really cool to be part of the art world. And I'm one of the few people that actually make a living doing this. And I didn't realize that, first of all, people need food and clothing, shelter, and everything else before they might have an interest in art. And I didn't realize that, this was almost impossible. But I've been able to do it. And I did it initially based on one thing. My dad was a doctor, but he wrote thank you notes to everybody that he took care of.
What?
Yeah. I built this up just writing a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note to every collector, whether they bought something for $10 or $10,000. And we do it by computer now, but I think something as simple as that, as well as having a good eye, built up the gallery. So, if you think about it, how many times you bought something from somebody, do you ever get a thank you note?
You could say the same for podcast hosts. For a while, I was sending thank you notes, and then it got to be too much. Oh, I feel terrible now.
No, when you said yes, I was like, why? I can't believe she said yes.
Yes, this is kind of unusual, listeners. Michael reached out to me and said, I'd really love to be on the podcast. And, I have a rather long list of people that I want to talk to at some point, eventually, whenever. And you were on the list, but you got to it before I got down the list.
Oh,
But
that's funny.
as you know, if I know you've been listening, and everybody else, like it is about supporting the ecosystem in a way that will enable younger people to become interested in it and to spend that discretionary budget on living with art, which we both think is the best thing ever.
Sure.
But I think it's just economically harder and harder. Like I don't know that my kids will ever be able to afford a house, and they're like, I can't buy
Oh
art,
yeah, no,
Mom. Sorry.
it's
What?
it's very, very tough, and I think I come from a pretty imaginative family. None of us, except for my younger son, he's normal. He works for a company, but everybody, my parents gave all of us an enormous amount of imagination, and if you want to do something, you have to try it when you're younger. My older sister has written over 20 books, maybe more. My parents put a lot of time into her, and she went to all the right schools and everything. She's got two kids who are movie stars. If you
Oh,
ever
right.
heard
We got to drop their names. Let's do it.
James Franco and Dave
Yeah.
Franco, and her middle son is an artist, and my other sister Heidi, she never got out of the '60s, and her son's a swing dancer, and my older son Brian started this podcast called Wave TV with the Kelsey brothers, and my younger son Kevin, he works for a company out of Norway. But I think you have to not be scared to try these things before everybody says it's okay. I mean, nobody thought I would make it in the art world. I'll show you this. I don't know if this shows up, but this is a book I wrote on the American artists in Japan, and when I did the initial interviews for the book, my sister Betsy helped write this with me. I did the initial interviews, and I came back, and my sister put it in a much better form. But she said, Michael, you'll never get this book published. You have to know somebody. You have to have an agent to get a book published. And I said, I know that, but if I didn't believe in these 9 artists, and I'm a baseball person, so that's why I picked 9, because there's 9 people on a baseball team. At any rate, she said, you'll never get this book published. So after we finished the manuscript, I had spent all my money on these digital photos, and it was on these regular photos, it was before digital. And I said, Betsy, I'm going to send this book to the Charles E. Tuttle Company, which is the top publisher, one of the top publishers of Asian art books. So I sent it off to their headquarters in Boston on a Wednesday, and I sent the manuscript and these photos, and I called them the next day to make sure they had received it, and they didn't know who the heck I was, and they said, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Verne, we haven't received anything, and so I had used FedEx, and I called up FedEx. I said, I've been working on this book for over a year, and I've got all these really expensive photographs that didn't arrive in Boston, and they said, 1 second, we'll connect you to a supervisor. And the supervisor gets on the phone. He says, well, I'm sorry, Mr. Verne. He says, but there was smoke in the cabin of that plane and had to make an emergency landing in New York. I said, is everything all right? He says, oh, yeah, everything's all right, just a little bit of smoke. So I figured to get there the next day, and I went home that night. There were only 3 news stations at that time, and the first thing out of Dan Rather's mouth was, and a Federal Express plane burned on the way to Boston today. It's the first time in the history of Federal Express. And it shows this plane on the runway. It's completely black, and the top's burned off. And I switched to the other channels. Every channel is FedEx plane burns. So I said, oh, my God, the book burned up. So so I called up the Charles E. Tuttle Company the next day. I told them what happened. They started laughing. I said, I only have one more copy of these photographs. I can't afford to do these photographs again. And I don't know how this works, but if you don't want this, just send everything back to me. And so it took about another couple weeks to put it all back together. And I sent it off to them again. And about a month later, I get the whole thing back. And in the mail and the same packaging. And I thought, well, my sister's right. You have to know somebody or have to have an agent to get a book published. And I went to take out the manuscript, and the manuscript and the photographs, and inside was a letter saying, yes, we'd like to publish Quiet Elegance. So I always tell people that if you want to get a book published, you should always burn the first copy, because the only reason they looked at it was they wanted to see who the nut was who called on the phone.
Perseverance. It always counts.
Yeah. But again, nobody had written a book about these people, because, again, you have to be way ahead of what the trend may be and who may be important 50 to 100 years from now.
But it's so hard, the contemporary, I'm back to this contemporary angle, because I had a boss's boss one time say to me, there's a difference between contemporary art and art made today. So there's this whole, sort of snobbery around the contemporary art discourse in New York City and LA. Yeah. And the rest of us are, laboring along, and people are making work, and it's good as anything else and not getting any play. How you just have to be a tireless promoter, I guess, of your contemporary people.
Yeah, you have to really believe in these people. In order for me to represent somebody, they have to be what I consider to be a really good artist and a really nice person. The one, I believe everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And, my weakness is I'm not the most intelligent person in the world. But because I grew up with these scrolls that hung in the Metropolitan and the Cleveland Art Museum and the Fogg at Harvard, I have a visual sense that most people don't have, and it's not something you can learn from just reading all the textbooks about Japanese art. The other thing is that when I walk to this gallery and my name's in front here, it's a lot more than just making a sale. And I treat somebody the same that buys something for $50 or $50,000, and my name's on it. And I can't promise everybody that everything's going to be worth millions of dollars or something and sell my soul. And I've done a lot of these art fairs they've got all these fancy frames up there, and gold frames and silver frames and a bunch of junk in the middle of it. And I can't do that. And so I'm also, with most of my artists, they all have good days and they have bad days. And I have a very discerning eye, and so I pick out what I think are the best works by these artists. And when I first started, many of my artists said, Michael, everybody takes everything I make. Why aren't you taking this? I go, well, if I show that piece with your really good piece, everything's going to look mediocre. When I do these shows, I show these larger works on a table and talk about each artist. If I show one work that's sort of just okay, everybody's going to go to the next booth. But if each piece is more fascinating than the next, you can capture an audience even if they don't know who you are.
So when you were in school, did you have any Japanese, Asian art classes, or is it all self-taught?
I was very good at sports, and I should have either been a gym teacher or the ice cream man. If I ever retire from this, I'm going to get a little cart and go around my street. I grew up in this neighborhood in Shaker Heights of little homes. It was like, I don't know if you ever watched Leave It to Beaver, but it was pretty much like that. I didn't know until later in life that people did all these crazy things, but you used to have your teachers come over for lunch, and I remember we had this art teacher. She looked like the Wicked Witch in elementary school, and she came over for lunch, and I begged my mother not to invite her. And she said, Michael's never going to do anything in art. And people also asked me, why didn't you make the gallery bigger? My dad wasn't into sports, and I've always regretted not doing more for myself. My two kids played baseball through college, and that's what I'm most proud of. Yeah? Where
Yeah.
Where did your kid play?
He was a pitcher for Trinity College in Hartford, D3.
Oh, mine was D3 too. If I had married a 7-foot tall woman, they could have gone pro. But and I'm only 5'6". I have the only two kids who went to Oberlin College to play baseball, and Worcester, where you went, was the big baseball
What?
team.
They
Yeah,
sure were.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm most proud of. I went to almost every game. I coached their little league games, and that was another reason why after the first Works on Paper show with Sanford Smith, I had to get back because I had to coach the team the next day.
Yeah, that was fun watching the kids play ball. That was, yeah. We would go up to Hartford to catch those games. We actually flew to Boston to watch him pitch against Tufts one time, and
Oh
it was
yeah.
so worth it. It was so great.
Oh, it's just there's nothing better. It's
Yeah.
you can accomplish all these things in life. I've seen many people, very very successful people, but to see your kids excel at whatever their dream might be, or just do all right and be, halfway decent human beings, and to me that's my greatest accomplishment.
I think our baseball player is my oldest, and he finally, after so many years, has been diagnosed with ADHD. And I think baseball saved him in his college career because it gave him something to focus on. And the thing that struck me so much was what he would transform into a different person on the mound.
Yeah,
And you'd watch him and it'd be like, who the heck is that kid? It was
yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, so at any rate, I was always in elementary school. I was always one of the first ones picked for the pick up football, baseball, whatever it is. But I didn't realize that, my parents wanted me to be some very very cultured intellectual, and once I flunked out kindergarten, they just said, "Good luck, Mike." It's
Oh, that's not true, is it? So you repeated kindergarten, so what?
Yeah, no, it continued on. I went to Shaker Heights High School, and at that time they had the highest SAT scores in the country until I went there.
Oh,
I didn't even know the PSATs didn't count.
where did you go to college?
I went to University of Denver, and it was, anybody could get in there if you had the $5,000 to pay. It's now a tough school to get into, but it's
Right.
my senior year. I lived all my friends were sports people, and we lived in a place. This one kid was from Skaneateles, New York, and this is in Bordino County. So we none of us wanted to become part of a fraternity or anything like that. So we started our own. It was called the Bordino Sports Palace, and every Thursday night we'd have this big party, and the whole campus would come to this little house and right off campus, and the police would shut it down around 1 o'clock in the morning, and it was a good time.
This is
And
not exactly what you might imagine for the college career of a well-known and much loved Japanese art dealer.
no, I'm telling you, I'm the least likely person ever to be a Japanese art expert. It's
But what made you do it?
after college, I was the assistant manager at a Hyatt hotel in Long Beach, California. And I was this naive kid from the Midwest, and I didn't realize people did all this stuff in hotels. I finally quit after about 2 years. About maybe 3 weeks before I was ready to leave, I'd walk around in a little Yves Saint Laurent suit because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And I was the manager on duty one Saturday, and the front desk calls me and said that this guy in room 152 doesn't want his room cleaned. He's got a gun on the bed, $10,000 on the table. And I said, all right, I'll check this out, because I was in charge of the housekeepers too. And so I knocked on the door, and I go, manager, and this guy opens up the door, and there's the money, there's the gun. And it was a time when we're having trouble with Khomeini. He's got a picture of Khomeini taped to the mirror with bullseyes. And I said, okay, we won't clean your room. This was 100% occupancy, little Hyatt hotel near the beach. And so I called my manager up. His name was Mike. He says, oh, I'll be over, don't worry. And he says, let's go back up there. And he goes back up there, and this guy frisks him when he opens up the door and he frisks my boss up and down, and I'm standing behind my boss like this, and he goes, I think you're right. And this guy, I can't remember what his problem was. Then about a week later, I was the manager on duty again, and somebody told me there's smoke coming out of one of the rooms, and I go over there and there's smoke coming out of this room, and I called the front desk and I said, who did you check into? You're supposed to get like ID and all this stuff. And he said, who did you check into room 137 or whatever it was? And the desk clerk doesn't answer me. I said, well, who'd you check in? And he goes, well, it says man from Mars. And the next day I resigned. I came back home, decided to get my MBA at Case Western Reserve, and I realized that my mom had started something special. I thought, wouldn't it be neat to see if I could take it a little bit further? So.
Wow. So you started a serious art education in Japanese everything.
I did it based on my eye and what I'd seen as a kid.
Wow.
And the belief that if you really believe in something and you care about something, you can build it and prove everybody wrong.
So do you have a sense of your own methodology when you're approaching art by somebody you know or don't know, and what it is about it that will make it rise to the top as opposed to being mediocre?
With my luck, probably about 10 years after I croak, everybody will say these guys are fantastic. But some have risen to the top. Some of these artists retire because it's the only thing more stupid to do than what I do is to be the artist in terms of making a living. And I think almost everybody that stayed with me, I've introduced their work, everywhere from New York to Art Basel. And the other thing is it's very, very difficult to do these art fairs now. You have two very, very successful art fairs that you worked on, and I really admire what you do. But most of these art fairs, when we originally, like even the shows at the Armory, it was all these really creative, smaller galleries that were doing them. And then the bigger galleries got in, and they didn't want these little galleries invading their territory. And they made the rent so high that you'd have to sell $75,000 to $100,000 just to break even. And so I have to do these smaller art fairs now, but it's still important to do it to get your name out there and make people realize you're still out there. But I'm not sure that the younger person can do it anymore unless they develop their own little auction house, or develop an internet presence that's beyond what's being done now. I thought my Instagram and Facebook Sundays with Mike would bring more people in, but it hasn't increased the sales, but I enjoyed doing it.
It's like yelling in the wind. It's really hard.
It's very, very hard.
Are you doing the IFPDA fair in March?
No, I was the first Japanese print gallery to do IFPDA, but they've become too expensive. Again, the big galleries got into IFPDA, and these guys get on the board, and I don't really know if this is true or not, but you'll find that most of these original galleries that were the basis for a lot of these art fairs, they're all dropping out because of the cost. And also, many of us are getting older too. I can't handle the stress I used to handle. If there's too much stress, my medical bills will be too high.
Okay, fair enough. Well, and that does bring me to another question, which is there a succession plan for the Verne Collection?
No, my kids have watched me do this, and they're doing really well on their own, and I don't think so. I do it more for my family right now, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can. But I wish there was, but I don't know if I recommend it because you can't build it up like I built it up originally anymore. It takes a very good understanding of technology, which I don't have, to figure out the next step in all of this. But I'm still thinking that the art world will discover me and save me.
My husband always likes to say, how do you how do you make a small fortune in being an art dealer?
Yeah.
You start with a large fortune.
You can do it slowly and you can do pretty well, but you got to be careful not to sell your soul to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why we like the smaller dealers, because you guys have, this is your life and you believe passionately in what you do. And to me, makes the relationship and the buying process that much more special.
These guys really, really care. And, just to give you an idea, I've only told you about Daniel Kelly, but there's a woman named Sarah Breyer. She was born in Rochester, New York. She's lived in Japan almost as long as Daniel. And she works in an 800-year-old paper-making village. She's the only Westerner allowed to work in the village of Echizen. She's got a big show coming up at the Oberlin Art Museum now, but her work's in the Smithsonian and I think the British Museum. And there's a lot of remarkable people like her. There's a Yuko Kimura who does my correspondence to Japan. She came to my gallery 25 years ago. She had won the Agnes Gund Award. She's a very, very shy person, and her whole concept is this concept called wabi-sabi, which is about the beauty of imperfection. And she takes these old Japanese woodblock print page books and prints over them. And these books, she only finds the books where the worms ate through the books. And in the history of Japanese prints, everybody wants perfect prints. And at any rate, Yuko came to the gallery about 25 years ago, showed me the piece that won the Agnes Gund Award, and I asked if I would show it. I didn't know who she was. I said, I'll try. I sold it in one day. She didn't come back for 10 years. She was so quiet and shy, and I needed somebody to help me with the correspondence to Japan. And at that time, the other Japanese woman was moving, and she's now got about 15 museum shows through 2026. And all these people started from nothing. There's a guy named Katsunori Hamanishi, who's one of the top mezzotint artists in Japan. He's had shows at Art Institute of Chicago and the Smithsonian. And people, I didn't exactly introduce him, but by just doing this very quietly and slowly, if nothing else, a few people know about some of these printmakers that nobody talked about before, at least on a large scale, talked about before I did it. I'll tell you what, one other guy, there's a guy named Joel Stewart, and Joel Stewart was born in Danville, California. He's been in Japan for over 30 years, and he's a good friend of Daniel Kelly's. And he used to smoke cigarettes with Daniel, and they would light their cigarettes either with a blowtorch or a candle. They probably weren't smoking cigarettes, and they went to the train station, left the candle in Joel's sink, and it falls into his disposal, which was made out of plastic, and he burns his whole studio down. But ever since he did that, he turned into a really great printmaker and painter. And if you look back in the history of Japanese prints, all the top Japanese printmakers that had anything to do with fire became very, very famous. All the top publishers and all the top Japanese print galleries. And I had no idea that I'd be doing this one day, but when I was 9 years old, I burned my parents' house down. So that's why I'm really good at this. I had gone on my first overnight camping trip, and before we all went to sleep, these kids stamped out the fire with their feet, and I thought that's really neat. I'll try that at home. And my dad, he'd go to work like 6 o'clock in the morning, come home around 7 o'clock at night, eat dinner really quickly, and then he'd run into his first floor office to call all of his patients to make sure he hadn't killed them. And my mom had gone out that night. My sister Betsy was up in the attic reading the dictionary. And my sister Heidi, Betsy was about 18, Heidi was 13, and she didn't talk to anybody. So I figure, I'll try this. And at the time you had matches all over the house. Nobody smoked. But so I got these matches. I went to the second floor of my parents' bedroom, and I went into my mom's closet, and she had these Japanese oil paintings by an artist that wasn't any good, luckily, wrapped in brown paper and leaning up against her clothing. And I closed the closet door. I sat down. I lit the bottom of the paper on fire, and I tried to stamp it out. But since the paintings were at an angle, it didn't work. So I figure I can't stamp it out. I'll blow it out like you blow out a birthday candle. So flames got bigger. I figure I can't stamp it out. I can't blow it out. I'll fan the closet door. So I fan the closet door. The flames start shooting out the closet, and we had these little water glasses in the bathroom. So I ran to the bathroom, filled up this water glass, and I came back, and the flames are shooting out my parents' bedroom window. So I figure I better tell my sister. So I knocked on the attic door. I said, Betsy, you got to stop studying because the house is on fire. She runs down, leaves me up there. I knocked on my 13-year-old sister Heidi's door. I said, who didn't talk to anybody because she was 13. I said, Heidi, you got to come out of there because the house is on fire. So she looks in my parents' bedroom and she says, Mike, you better go tell Dad. So I ran down to the first floor, and my dad was talking to one of his patients on the phone. And I said, Dad, and he goes like this. He says, I said, but Dad, and he goes, I said, Dad, it's important. So he takes the phone with the old cord and he puts it in the drawer so nobody can hear. He says, what is it, Mike? I said, Dad, house is on fire. So we all run out in this little neighborhood in Shaker Heights, and I burned up my parents' entire bedroom. My baseball cards were okay, and the fire chief comes up to me, and my dad had always said, make sure you don't embarrass the family, and all the neighbors are standing around, and the fire chief says to me, he says, little boy, he says, were you playing with matches? And so I thought about it. I said, no. And then he tricked me. He said, Mike, what color were they? I said, blue. So my parents told all the neighbors of an electrical fire, but
Oh my God.
but that's why I'm really good at what I do.
Mike, Jesus. I don't even want to know why you thought setting something on fire inside the house was a good idea, but okay.
No, but after that, all my friends were playing with matches. It was like the thing to do.
I mean, I played with matches too, but I was playing, like on the driveway, not.
Oh, no. My friends were playing in the yard with all the dried leaves. So,
Oh, God. Oh,
and then about 10 years ago, I live in the same house that I grew up in. I tell people I've gone nowhere in life. And but about 10 years ago, the local elementary school that I went to, which is about 5 blocks away, it burned down. I was sure they were going to think it was me, but
oh no.
yeah, it wasn't.
Oh, no. I expect not. All right. Well, is there something coming up that you want to let people know about, or?
Yeah, no, I'm doing these smaller fairs in San Francisco at Fort Mason. A lot of the rare book people are combining with the print people now.
Yeah, I've been seeing that lately.
Yeah, it doesn't
it makes
work,
sense,
but
I guess.
I'm still doing it. And but no, it's actually very nice people. And I'm doing that show in San Francisco. Then I'm doing a show in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles Fine Print Fair. It's a smaller print fair run by Veronica from Eggenolf Gallery. And then I do the Cleveland Museum of Art Fine Print Fair in the spring. And then some other art fairs in the fall. But 71 years later, despite myself, the Verne Gallery goes on.
It is amazing. I'm always struck by the parallel. Yeah, I'm struck by the parallel between you and Allison Tolman, because both were, started by parents in a way and kept going. It's kind of amazing to me that yeah, it's so cool. I do love the work. I have to say, Japanese contemporary prints are definitely in my wheelhouse.
Oh, no, Alice and I laugh about it all the time. And she's really, she's very, very brilliant. And she grew up in Japan. And so she knows Japan from a different aspect. My sisters lived in Japan in 1953 and 54. I was born in 55. And so.
Do you go to Japan for work now, like Allison does?
Yeah, I used to go every year. I haven't been back in a while. The one good thing about the internet is you can still do a lot through the internet. But I miss seeing all of my friends there. It makes for fun stories to talk about it at the art fairs or when people come into the gallery. I'm really curious to see who the next young person is who may go into Japanese prints. We need more young people with new energy and new ideas. Be curious to see how they figure out how to make it in this fascinating world, and it's always exciting.
It is true. Yeah, I worry about the ecosystem constantly, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what will happen. I feel like there's a lot of people like you who are aging that have these giant, inventories that I don't know what's going to happen to everything, and I worry about it all.
I don't know how I'm going to get all this stuff back to these artists. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I still have all the ideas and all these crazy ideas, but the way I do things is it takes about 10 years to make them happen. I do it in sort of a quiet way that nobody knows what's happening until it sometimes works. But I don't know if I got that 10 years to figure it out, but I'm going to keep trying.
Yeah, I'm turning 60 in 2 weeks, and
You look like you're
and
about 25.
oh, thanks, Mike. I know my oldest is 27, so but when you
Impossible.
hit the six, yeah, when you hit the 60 point, you're like, wait a minute, I have how many viable working years do I have left? How long can I keep this all up? It's a very strange switch from the 50s, I have to say.
You can't put quite as much stress on yourself because it's just not good for
Yeah,
your health. And
right.
you do these art fairs, and I know how hard it is to please these people. I mean, they sometimes they don't do the work themselves to get their customers to come, and then they blame the poor person who's nice enough to organize the exhibition, and and to please that many people and make sure everybody does well at the art fair. It's and to coordinate all the stuff that you got to get ready and all the people that put it together and put the walls up and everything else. I couldn't do it.
It's a lot of work for sure. I was
Yeah,
liken it to, if you have 20 vendors at your fair, it's like having,
yeah.
managing 20 weddings, 20 brides.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, not easy. No, people are not easy. So that's the
No.
one nice thing about having a gallery. Nobody comes in. So
Well, for all of you people who live in and around Cleveland, and you should take a little trip down to Little Italy and go check out the Verne Collection because there's
yeah,
some beautiful things on the walls there. And it looks like you've got a lot of drawers for things.
lots of drawers. And this piece sitting behind me is called "Rolling Out." It's an early painting by Daniel Kelly of the schoolgirls riding through the countryside. But no, I thank you so much for interviewing an ordinary guy like me.
You sell yourself short, Mike.
I'm only 5'6". So.
Well, small but mighty, maybe, or mid-size and mighty.
Yeah, well, they always say watch out for the little guy, and
That's right.
if anybody comes to any of the art fairs, just look for the crowds.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, which is another thing that we should end on, which is that by the time this is out, probably the Brooklyn Print Fair will be nigh. And for any of you guys who are vendors, you have to stand up and you have to engage the people who are coming to your booth like Michael Verne does.
Yeah,
Because,
maybe I should give a course on this.
right,
Yeah,
you're
no, that
right.
Brooklyn Art Fair sounds fantastic. And unfortunately, I signed up for a different one, and I right around the same time. I've heard about your Baltimore Art Fair for years. Tried to beg my way into that, but anybody that is involved with you, I know it's high quality, and I know just from talking to you and watching a few of your podcasts and some of your posts on Instagram that you're a pretty fun person, and I think the art world needs a little bit of humor too. And so if you get nothing else out of this podcast, if you want to see the real Mike, watch Sundays with Mike on Verne Gallery Instagram.
There you go.
And you won't think all of us in the art world are so serious and scary.
Well, yeah, and if you are at a print fair near you and you see Mike in a booth, you will now feel like you know him and can wander over and say, "Hey, show me the XYZ."
Yep, and we can talk baseball, we can talk art, and we can laugh about life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I feel like we shouldn't make art harder for people. If art is for everyone, we have to come to this place where we are not unwelcoming and we're not thinking we are smarter or better or whatever. Like it is for everybody. So that's part of my plan. Well, the thing about the fairs that we run is, we're not a company, no offense to Sanford Smith, but we're not running it as a business. We're running it because we care passionately about the ecosystem and want everyone to succeed. All boats rise. So, we're there to make every effort to make it work for everybody.
I was just going to say that there's not this great mystery to art. The average guy, when they know anything about art or interested in art, should be able to walk into any place, museum, nice gallery, bad gallery, and just say, I like that or I don't like that. And I haven't slept for the 43 years I've been doing this, but I start sleeping finally because I finally realized that people will make a decision in 100 years whether I'm right about many of these living artists. And Van Gogh thought he sucked. He sold one piece his whole life, and now everybody flocks to see him. And that's the one thing I would tell anybody that showing contemporary art is don't worry about it too much, because people will either be criticizing you or telling how great you are in 200, 300 years.
I think that we're blessed to do the thing that we love, and if we're lucky, we can make a living at it. And, I don't know. I feel like we're super lucky that way.
One more little prop, but if you can't find a gallery, just look for the welcoming cap. So.
I love that. All right. Well, Mike, thanks for coming on Platemark. I have really enjoyed our conversation this morning, and I so appreciate you doing it.
Thank you, and I hope we meet up many more times and maybe sit at a bar and laugh our heads off.
Okay, twist my arm. Thanks for listening to this episode of Platemark with my guest, Michael Verne. Hope you enjoyed it. I find him hilarious and fun to talk to, so I hope you got as much out of it as I did. Thank you to Michael, of course, for being a wonderful guest. Thanks, Michael. And as usual, thank yous to other folks as well. To Dan Fury of Extension Audio for being my sound guy. Thanks, Dan. And to Uncle Michael Diamond for the use of his original music. And one last one to Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for sending me soundscapes from their studios that comprise the intro and outro of this pod. The soundscape, as it were. All right, images are over on the show notes, as you know, at platemarkpodcast.com. And you can also hit support and donate over there and help me keep the lights on. I'd appreciate it so much. Is that it? I think that's it. We will see you next time.